All right, Ben, great to see you. Thank you very much for making time today.
My pleasure, Paul. Great to be on.
So, just a bit of context for people before we jump into it. Today is just going to be a short, informal conversation, perhaps 15, 20 minutes, where I unpack how you think about business development and what actually works.
Exactly. Looking forward to it. Should be fun.
Good, good. So, I've got a few questions here. I probably won't get through all of them, but let's start with something simple. Can you please introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and how you got into BD?
Certainly, I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. My name is Ben Paul. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called the BD Ladder. We're a business development agency that specializes in helping everyone in professional services, but particularly lawyers, in doing business development and marketing. Called the BD Ladder because we take people through a simple step of process up the rungs of the ladder so they can feel more confident and happy in their success. How I got into this is kind of a long story. Here I am based in Auckland. We work globally. I started in London as a salesperson. So everything I've done is been learnt the hard way in corporate sales, learning how to get to people, how to talk to them, how to build relationships, how to develop on the long term. Then I spent a period of time working in-house, coaching people directly, building teams, and actually building that BD and marketing skills and pipeline, which led me to ultimately follow my passion and building my own business and helping people here in Auckland, but also in Australia, further afield across Asia and other parts of the globe through coaching and consultancy services.
Thank you. I guess starting with a new relationship when you're thinking about business development, what would sort of typically be your first move?
I think when you're starting, it's always interesting whether you've made the approach or they've made the approach to you. But either way, there's a point of interest and to find out what that interest is and to not assume it's the obvious. So a lot of times I'll ask what kind of help they want with BD and marketing and why. And the why is really interesting because quite often you would think it would be the desire to get more sales, to get more clients. Quite often it's actually having a tangible way to understand how business comes in the door and how they can have a better understanding of what will come in and when it will come in. So having an actual systems and process and an understanding of how it actually works rather than what is traditional, particularly with a lot of law firms, which is, well, it all comes from referrals and it can drop at any moment. And we don't know how or when it will come. It just kind of happens. But we've been doing okay, but we're not sure how long that will last and whether we're going to grow or we can't actually have foresight of where it will be. So more often than not, it's actually finding that clear systems and process, not actually a desire to suddenly spark new revenue, which is what you would potentially assume. So always seeking to understand why someone needs help and what that help would be and for what reason really helps you to actually truly help them from a client perspective.
Interesting. I must admit I hadn't thought about that. I was going to ask you next, sort of, what's the one question you would always ask a potential client? But you've sort of maybe addressed that a bit.
Yeah,
Is it sort of the why?
it is really the why. Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes any area of weaknesses. What I often find in initial meetings, if I can ask a question and be quiet for as long as possible, they'll fill in the silence. And then what usually happens is after the first point, they'll actually think a little bit deeper and then they'll reveal the second point of why they need help. And sometimes that actually is the true nub of the issue or the pain point, for want of a better term. But it often unpacks after they do their thinking in the room with you. So that secondary prompt questions great, but actually sometimes just maintaining silence because if you keep doing that now and being silent to me, I'll feel the need to fill it. So that silence thing is really, really powerful.
Right, right. In terms of, I guess a lot of, or any salesperson, but I'm thinking of law firm partners here in my mind. They're literally billing by the hour, so they certainly value their time. And I would imagine a lot of, well, certainly again, just speaking from partners I know here, there's a lot of door knocking, sort of messages going out, maybe calls, presentations, and there's a lot of output. And I think ideally, the, any salesperson, but especially partners, want to maximize and they want to be as efficient as possible.
Mm.
And I would guess, just based on my own experience, you sort of want to start saying no as early as possible what are your thoughts on that? And also along the same lines, what are sort of some maybe early red flags that you may be looking out for in that initial or an early conversation?
I think initially, in the world of sales and knocking on doors, the best answer is a yes. The second best answer is a no, and the worst answer is being ghosted or silence,
Mm,
because you have to
mm,
invest time then following it up and doing a professional thing, and that's a huge amount of waste of time. Whereas a quick no is better because at least that ends the process. To understand who's serious and who wants your services and who doesn't requires understanding what kind of qualification questions you should ask, and asking more questions, trying to understand why they're speaking to you, what interests they have, when they perceive a need. And look, in the world of
mm,
services and legal services, it won't necessarily be I need you now, particularly in litigation, but what type of services they might need in the future, what they've seen in the last 5 years, how often they want to have contact with someone ahead of those services. And it's how you phrase it. You want to know if they have the authority to purchase those services. And look, if you ask that question outright, everyone will say yes. Or they'll be offended and affronted, and you think they don't have organizational authority. You say, look, hey, look, in my organization, sometimes we have to, get different stages of the business case and sign off for various levels of things. Is that something that's similar with you? So make it kind of something they can then explain the process of how they purchase, and then you'll understand whether they truly have the authority or not, and whether you need to speak to someone else or how it works. And then just ascertain where it is. And you'll probably get some visual clues as well, because if you sit there and you see their pen from another law firm, and you and you see other stuff like that, you probably know they're using someone else. And you may know that before you go in the room, and I suspect you probably do already anyway. So if that is the case, trying to ascertain, questions like, look, I understand you use law firms already. How are you finding that? What do you like about the current provision of services, and what do you think could be better? Start to make it a generic conversation. Don't get into talking about the actual competitor, but make it a broader conversation about how you might work with them, and frame it so they can see a way of working with you and how that might look and how that transition would be, rather than trying to get into mudslinging, which doesn't work for anyone particularly well. So
no,
that's how I would do it.
great. No, great advice. Sort of some fundamentals there that maybe some people overlook. Sort of on that point, what are some of the maybe with it when you're advising people or just in your experience, what are some of the common mistakes that people will make typically, certainly early on in BD?
I think a typical one is they'll make an offer rather than getting the client to express what they require. And a classic one is, would you like me to send you a fee proposal? Would you like me to send you some extra credentials? Even if the client isn't interested, or a prospective client is interested, they'll say yes. Because much like if someone knocks on your door to try and sell you something, and you're in the middle of watching your favorite program or your favorite sports event, you're going to say yes. What you actually mean is no, get out of my life. But it's the quickest way of doing it politely, so you can carry on with your day.
Right.
And when the conversation dries up and it hasn't got an obvious point, we feel the need to make an offer. Whereas actually, if you flip that round and say, look, I've really enjoyed our conversation, learning more about you. How do you see us progressing this? They'll tell you what they require.
Mm,
And that's where
mm,
you can dig it out. And then when they say, look, I'd like you to send me some information on prices and fees, absolutely. What information do you require? Dig deeper. The one thing that everyone misses out, and look, I've been guilty of this myself, even though I know it, but over time we forget this one, is to actually express, when would you like it by, and when will you make a decision on this by, or when can I follow you up by? Because most people need a prompt, but if we don't have a point where we can prompt to, we'll always feel like we're intruding. We don't need to. But if you send that note saying, hey, look, you asked me to send you a proposal after your meeting, I'll certainly get that across to you in the next 3 days as agreed.
mm,
And you said you'd let me know by the second week. If I haven't heard from you by then, I'll follow up. There, it's all out in the open. Everyone agrees to it.
mm,
It's easy
mm,
to then make those follow-ups and those calls and not be a pest. And they actually appreciate it. You're helping them. You're showing you can manage a process, which is also a very important part of providing any service.
Sounds so simple, but so effective. I mean, again, you're asking them questions and you're letting them make the decisions.
Look, absolutely, people like buying stuff in any form,
Mm,
whether it's services or not.
mhm.
I mean, litigation law, maybe not, but in essence, we feel better when we're in control. And actually, in that point, it's even more crucial in that kind of area because actually, that's the point where people feel they've lost control. So you're giving them control back. They're at least making a decision of who's going to help them and who's going to navigate through. Whereas if you're being sold to, actually, the person selling is fully in control, which look will appeal to a lot of A-type personalities, but actually doesn't build a longer term relationship, doesn't build good client relationships, doesn't build an understanding. So the more you can put them in control, the more they will give it back and actually naturally work with you. It's like a dynamic of actually trusting your client to make the right decision and giving them the information to enable them to do so.
Again, sounds so simple, but I could guess because I've certainly I've done the opposite of that on many occasions, and I could imagine a lot of people just maybe in the heat of the sale or the meeting, they just it slips their mind.
Look, the reason why coaches are such a powerful thing and effective, whether they're formal coaches like myself or mentors or colleagues in your business, is that they can kind of pull you back and hold you back from the everyday pressures, the real and perceived pressures. So there's real pressures around the need and desire to grow a practice, keep people busy, keep up with the other partners down the office and all those kind of things. And they can lead to kind of behavior that won't help the sales process. They'll help you try and cut corners, try and force the sale, try and push it forward. They're natural
Mm,
and we feel those. And if we're going through a quiet period, and most professional services have that kind of curve of busy, not busy, busy, not busy. And when you're not busy, there's nothing more stressful than that. So it's very natural to cut these corners, hurry up the process,
mm.
try and get as many fee proposals out the door, whether they're real or not, just to feel like you're actually doing something.
That's a really great point. In those quiet periods, what would some sort of general advice be?
It comes down to lists and organization. So the first thing is real relationships. Know who you want to have your relationships with, know what categories they're in. And by that, I mean, who's your client base? Who are your good referrers and your top referrers? And who are those prospects? Who are the 3 or 4 people or clients that you're actually going to invest time trying to win in the next 6 to 18 months? And see it as that time investment and how are you going to build the plans to do that? How often do you have to see them? Go back to the process of seeing those people in those periods of time, refinding out what's important to them, seeing what's on the horizon, keeping in touch in a meaningful way, and where possible, introduce your clients and referrers to each other if meaningful, because that will strengthen your relationship with them because you're bringing them something of value that isn't just about your service. As much as you want contacts and new clients, most of your clients and your referrers will also want the same things. To actually being that connector, the person that actually points people and brings them together, means that as and when they're ready, they will naturally find to you. They will also start referring you to others and have an active referral program. So one of the pieces of work I do with a lot of people is actually around okay, a lot of your work comes from referrals. Do you ask for them? And then they go, why? And they say, I feel embarrassed to ask for them. It's really hard. At the end of a really good piece of work, that was really great. Is there anyone else in your network you think could also benefit from this type of service, or anyone else in your organization? Simple question to ask. If that is a leap too far, though, going back to that control and power and giving them control, ask them, any client or referrer, who would you like me to refer you to?
Like it.
In the middle of the conversation, they're most likely to go, I'm not sure, but actually, who would you like me to refer you to? Because we throw the control back in that situation. And studies will
Mm,
show that's kind of how it works. So then you can say,
mm,
well, these are the type of people I'd like, or could you introduce me to that person? And look, they're probably going to come back after you've done that and say, and you make sure you reoffer them again. This actually, is there anyone, or is there someone in the organization can do that? And that's actually just going to strengthen that relationship and build an ongoing process of referrals, but you won't feel awkward because you made an offer you haven't asked, so you haven't sold, and you'll have more control, more visibility of where those referrals are coming from. And we all know that if someone refers you to someone, the chance of you winning that deal are way higher than if you're invited in amongst a cast of 4 or 5 in a beauty parade. Tricky, hard to stand apart.
That's fantastic. I had not thought of that approach, and you sort of again answered a question I was going to ask, but I'll ask it anyhow because I think for a lot of partners that I speak with in Tokyo, this is very relevant, and that is other than what you mentioned there about asking the client who you can refer them to. What other advice would you give to someone who doesn't like selling? That just makes them feel icky, or they don't think they're a salesperson, or they're not that aggressive, or something like that.
My advice is obviously get help and get advice and build a process, but take comfort and confidence in you're actually in the best place to be successful. So those people who are less aggressive, slightly more introvert, once they get confident, have more conversations and get in front of people, however they do that, tend to be the best salespeople because naturally, instinctively, they are curious and they listen and they respond to what the other person says. Whereas a slightly more aggressive or more extrovert person tends to want to dominate the room, and that actually doesn't make for a great relationship builder. So what we see and perceive as great in sales actually is counterintuitively not the right behavior and the right process. So over the years, I'm actually a very fast talker and a very quick thinker. I naturally have slowed down my cadence and my talking, so I listen more. So I've self-taught myself that, and mentors have helped teach me that.
That piece of advice there is going to go down really well with sort of a lot of people. And again, in Japan, I think there's a cultural element. People don't want to be aggressive or be
No.
perceived as aggressive. It's very much, and look, I'm probably speaking for the whole world here, but
Yeah.
certainly this market very much long-term relationship based. People value stickability and loyalty. So,
Yeah, look, and I think many years ago, I think it was out of the States, there was, and I forget where it was, but one of the big ticket sales where it might be planes or be something similar where and you sell one every 2 or 3 years, they actually moved their salespeople off commission and gave them a higher basic.
mm,
And the rationale behind that is if you put someone on commission, they actually won't necessarily demonstrate the best behaviors because it's in their interest to bring the sale forward to get it done quicker to do that because then they'll get paid. Whereas if you just pay them to build relationships and focus on the relationship outcomes, they behave in a much longer term thinking kind of way. They become part of the company. They see it as their role to, yes, ultimately win the deal, but win it by building relationships and doing the right things over a period of time, not trying to take shortcuts. Because ultimately, any
mm,
commission structure should reward the behaviors you want to see, not the
mm.
outcome you're trying to get. And that's where people sometimes get those levers wrong. So that's really smart when you look at that kind of way they change their behavior, that they're focused on the commission there to get the behaviors they want to see from their salespeople.
Yeah, no, that is something I think a lot of organizations probably miss, perhaps. Generally speaking, don't name names here, but how do you think law firms, how well do they do generally in terms of incentivizing partners via their REM structure?
I think it's a problem for them. I think it's a
Mm,
problem globally. I think the issue comes in that, and studies have actually shown this in the legal industry, if you have a flat structure where everyone gets a share of the profits, you get the best behaviors in
mm,
terms of sales and building clients. However, you also get disgruntlement on a different kind of cultural level because, hey, that person's doing more, that person's working harder, this person's sitting there not doing much in their corner office, earning the same as me. How's that right? But anytime you have performance related structures, cross selling goes out the window. And we all know cross selling should be your most powerful tool, particularly in a multidisciplinary law firm. But if you're sitting here in, say, the corporate department, and if you refer a big case over to employment, and now that partner gets band A because you've referred them that piece of work, and you sit at band B, you're not going to feel very good about that, even though you're
mm,
one by like. and that competitive nature kicks in, and actually it means people will either try it to themselves or actually even refer it outside of their law firm because that keeps their pay structure high. These behaviors start to come in because we're human beings. So if you want to try and build that culture of one firm, then actually, again, model the behaviors you want. But if you put partners across against each other and you don't get those levers right, cross-selling will just not exist.
Yeah, it's something I think about a lot, and every firm I speak with has a different structure, and
Yeah.
there are a small number who come to mind that I think do it pretty well, but the majority, I think, yeah, they have real issues.
And look, the best structures tend to exist in the smaller boutique firms, but then they tend to exist because they're a completely different business. Once you get to size and capacity, it's much harder. And getting that fairness and that balance, I can say that a flat structure works really well and give you the best sales outcome, and it absolutely will. But that's only one part of the whole pay package and the structure package. You need to take in those other factors as well. So that's why there's people who specialize in looking at that kind of area. It's really, really tricky, but at least understanding which levers affect which parts of your firm will help you land on what's right for your firm, and then for me, knowing what their structures are allows me to say, well, actually, you're going to struggle with cross-selling, so we're going to have to build it a different way, and you can work with a firm that way, right?
Interesting, thank you. Okay, I will wrap up here, Ben, but let me finish by asking, where can people connect with you and learn more about what you do and the services you provide?
So I have a website, bdladder.com. They can email me at ben@bdladder.com. Always happy to have a conversation with someone. I'm ridiculously easy to find on LinkedIn as well, and I'm sure when you put this out, you'll tag me on LinkedIn as well, so people can easily contact me on there. More than happy to do so. And look, if there was one sort of final parting piece of advice I'd give people, if you really do want to develop a better business development habit, commit to doing something even for 15 to 20 minutes once a week, at the start of the week, early in the morning, every week. And whether it's sending emails out, posting on LinkedIn, whatever you choose as your activity, do it for at least 6 months, build that habit. The most successful people at building relationships form a habit of outreach work, and it sticks. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Ben. This has been fantastic and practical, and I know my network are really going to appreciate this. So thank you again.
No, awesome. I've enjoyed it. It's been great chatting to you, Paul.
Thank you, Ben.